They love talking about President Trump convicted felon on the campaign trail, and now you've got Jack Smith and these issues really bubbling up about whether or not any of these cases can even move forward. And so Jack Smith can't even file a joint status report on August 16th. He's asked a judge in Washington, D.C. to again delay this case because of the Supreme Court case. And the reason why he can't file, as my dad said, the joint status report, they want 2 more weeks, is because they're not sure they have any evidence that would be allowed under what the Supreme Court just issued. And of course, there's part of that Supreme Court decision that said you've got to go back through and look at each act and go through a fact-specific kind of program put together. And then the Supreme Court would have to okay the constitutionality of that program, which is if it was while the president's in office, you have to assume, the Supreme Court said, that if it's an official act, then they have immunity from criminal prosecution, both while they are president and after their presidency. It doesn't make any sense to give it to them only while they're president, because if the immunity was gone the day after you're president, which is something they wanted to argue in court, then you would be a president that would felt like you were totally hamstrung, and that, again, if there was a switch in the power politically, they'd bring criminal charges against you for your official acts. And surprise, surprise, that happened to President Trump. Exactly. They didn't say that you could never, by the way, do anything you want as president. So don't hear that from the left. They said you have to give the presumption of immunity, that if it's done as president, it's an official act. And then you've got to determine, at what point does it become a criminal act that would be outside an official act, not just a policy decision. Even one that's a radical policy decision that you might not like does not make it criminal. And so, again, this affects all of the charges Jack Smith is trying to bring. But what we also know as well is that the deep state is alive and well, and they are going after the top folks who are willing to speak out. And I think the reason why they've targeted our colleague Tulsi Gabbard is because she left the Democrat Party. She, remember, delivered a very stinging kind of attack response to Harris during that initial presidential debate back in 2020. And then Harris gets the presidential nomination. Tulsi does an interview on Fox News. And by the way, I will say, not different than said anything different than what she would say 2 weeks before that. It wasn't like she made some claim of some special information. It was opinion on now Harris as the nominee. And she was on stage with Harris. So she had to debate her. So she has knowledge about that. And then the next time she goes on a plane, which is 2 days later, she goes through the Quad S. She has air marshals following her around and on the plane with her. We now know from whistleblowers as well, we've got to protect them with Empower Oversight. So the resources at the ACLJ, we talk about just the broadcasting resources to tell the story, to get you all educated about it, while we've got an entire legal team. Obviously the FOIA is in movement right now, but we know that we are up against not one government agency, but maybe half a dozen or more.
That's right. And really, I want to point back to something your dad said in the last segment about it has a lot of aura, if you will, of the IRS case. So to take people back, that was back the Tea Party movement during the Obama years. It came out of really the push against Obamacare and those midterms. But what we started seeing is that individual Tea Party groups, they reached out to us that they were getting these very broad, weird, probing letters about the content of their prayers, wanting back-end access to their website, wanting a list of members, things that just weren't right. And when we first saw it, you had to look at it as, is this an anomaly?
Yeah, that's almost what you felt like. This has to be a one-off, just moronic move by someone at IRS, and how could this possibly have gone out to what we learned was thousands of the letters sent out.
Right. And then as we dug at the ACLJ, as our attorneys got to work, we realized this was a systematic effort to try to silence the voice of the political enemies of President Obama at the time.
Bring criminal charges against him.
Exactly.
And Jack Smith was running the office that Lois Lerner went to.
Exactly.
To see, and she wrote in the email, if we could bring a couple of criminal charges against these groups, that shuts them down. No one's going to want to be part of the Tea Party group. So it wasn't even about tax-exempt status, ultimately. It was about putting grassroots Americans in prison. When else has that been done? because of people that attended a rally. Even their folks, or trying to be done to a president because they spoke at a rally. So support the work of the ACLJ. Again, I'm making this big push today because this is one of those highly involved cases because you're taking on so many different levers of the federal government. So you've got the security state. You've got the NSA side, the FBI side, the Department of Homeland Security, which oversees TSA, of course, Department of Justice, because they're going to litigate it, but they've also got the FBI under them. So you go to the FBI. And then of course, State Department as well. Was there something here that was foreign? How was this triggered? Or was it completely done as a targeted political act? And we know this program hasn't been very effective. So is it just being used as another way to spy on conservative Americans or Americans who, again, are speaking out against far left policies that aren't working in a totally legal constitutional way? This is why we need your support for these resources, because we don't want this to, again, we want to move on this as quickly as possible. This protects constitutional rights long-term, not just of Tulsi Gabbard, but of you. I mean, if you're listening or watching this broadcast right now or support of the ACLJ, again, we might not have as big a profile individually as Tulsi Gabbard, but if they could do it to someone with as big of a profile as Tulsi Gabbard, how much easier is it for the government to come after you? So we want to make sure they can't do that. And we believe we can, but we need the resources to be able to bring this quickly. And if we have to bring specialists on, because we've got whistleblowers here too, we want to protect them because they always try to criminalize their whistleblowing, even though there's statutes to protect them. So we need you to go to aclj.org today. And if you can make a donation, if you're someone who really loves the broadcast, because you like, the updates we can give, the fact that we worked, for President Trump in our individual capacity, did the impeachments, did the Mueller report, so we really have the expertise there. And of course, you maybe like the other work we do, the government affairs work, but you've never made that donation. To you, it's more of kind of a show to learn. That's great, and we appreciate if you want to just join and listen and watch every day. Maybe the one thing you could do is share it with your friends. Doesn't cost you anything, or make sure you subscribe on the channel that you like watching the most, whether that's Rumble or YouTube, on Facebook. And then, of course, if you're in a spot, and I know everyone's not in that spot right now, but if you're in a spot where you can make a donation to the ACLJ, I mean, this is something we found out about Sunday, Monday. So I mean, again, we are moving very quickly now by the end of the week in how to bring forward these actions. You may have seen Tulsi last night on Sean Hannity's broadcast. She was, of course, on our broadcast yesterday, as she is regularly, because she is on the team here at the ACLJ because of your support of the American Center for Law and Justice. And we're able then to utilize the expertise of people like Mike Pompeo, a former Secretary of State and CIA director, when we bring a case like this, who's also an attorney. He was an attorney, went to Harvard Law, and Rick Grenell, who was the director of national intelligence. So support the work of the ACLJ during this Life and Liberty drive. It's just a coincidence that it happened during the drive, but it's great because the impact of your donation is doubled. That could be $500, it could be $100, it could be $10. But do it at aclj.org. It all matters. Donate today.